presentation. I am using text-to-speech because my microphone doesn't work sadly, so you'll have to work with this extremely corny voice for now. The topic we will be discussing today is something known as the elements of fiction. There are 7 topics I like to call mini-topics since they are a part of the one topic we are discussing, so let us run through this really quickly. The main 7 mini-topics are character, plot, setting, theme, point of view, conflict, and tone. But since this topic has a lot of mini-topics, like as earlier, I will have to be explaining this quickly since I don't have a lot of time to. Of course, starting with character. Firstly, some stories will have a main character, or in rarer occasions, multiple of them at the same time.
In fact, even you could be a main character in your own story. Even in real life, if you want to be a bit different, you will treat. You know who you are.
June 24, 2025, 5:28 p.m. And most stories will have a main character and their antagonist, or possibly antagonists, since it can make the story cooler in a way. Hint that I had said antagonists, plural s, so make sure you also keep this in mind. Antagonists are the main enemy in a story and main enemy to the protagonist that stop that main character or main characters from achieving a specific goal of theirs. Other characters include side characters, romantic interests, and other roles that a fictional character takes in a story. Side characters are mostly noted as sidekicks in stories, mostly like comics with superheroes that instead help the main character achieve their goal and prevent the antagonist from getting in the way. In a more well-written story, each character should have their own distinct appearances, personalities, or motivations but can be the same if you want to go for something unique. They drive the story forward with their own individual goals instead of being flat out, unique, boring, and not interesting.
Don't let your character behave like hardboiled eggs. I'm warning you, you really need it.
Next topic to cover is the plot. The plot is something that refers to the events that happen during a story. This can include major turning points that the character can experience. In general, every story has a beginning, middle, and end. If you can name me one fictional story that doesn't, I'll be quite shocked. Because of course, if a fictional story doesn't have one, it isn't real. The beginning is usually known as the exposition of the story, where key events are set into action. It's like an introduction to either a person or story. The middle is the rising action, where more progressive complications raise the stakes, or in other words, make the story have a conflict. Sometimes people won't add a conflict, making the story boring. We will go over this soon. Finally, we have the resolution, where the full story wraps up. This can have a good or bad ending, depending on what you're going for. Make sure you actually end your story, or it becomes repetitive. Happens more than you think, so come up with an ending people will enjoy. Back to our topic, which is the setting. The setting is the broad term of the world that the story takes place in. Keep this in mind. Here are some examples of the setting. Settings could be the country of somewhere, and possibly the climate. Sometimes, it could be the room that a character is standing in, the time of day that a story takes place, or day-to-day weather. Settings could even be something like the story being set in a single night, no matter the length. Quick topic, wasn't it? I told you so. Don't say I didn't. For our next topic, I will use a bit more examples for it since this can be quite a confusing element. And don't worry, I hate this element too, you are not alone. This element is known as theme, which can refer to more philosophical questions that the story explores. Most often, the theme is revealed in the story as something the protagonist learns, like a lesson. For example, one of the lessons in the science fiction book Frankenstein is that scientists should not use their powers to create new beings without considering consequences of these actions. However, themes could also be revealed through the core conflict between protagonists and antagonists, almost similar to other examples like something the antagonist learns instead of the protagonist. The protagonist versus antagonist theme variant also has an example of the book Harry Potter throughout the whole series, which a lot of you already know. Could have multiple themes, but mostly could be love or friendship. Thank goodness that the element we went over is finally finished, right? Well, be glad, because we are moving on to a more simple element. In fact, we are almost done. This is the fifth element. If you don't know this one, you probably should have been paying attention a few minutes ago at the start when I explained it. This element is known as point of view, but I'll just say POV to save my text space, since I can only type with so much in the text box for some reason. POV is the perspective from which a story is told from. Of course, for English class, the main ones you probably learned are first person, second person, and third person. However, third person is a special POV, since it has multiple variants in one. First person is the easiest to find, since it uses words like I, me, and my, signaling to the main character of the story telling you their story, or what happens along the way. Second person refers to the viewer, using words like you, kind of like a newspaper trying to advertise something. This can be more of a difficult one to find for some people because it can be kind of hidden at times. Third person has different variants as said earlier. Those include limited third person, using words like he, she, and they, only knowing their thoughts. Omniscient third person uses the same words but in an all-seeing perspective. Lastly, third person objective is only reporting what is seen and heard. Of course, POV is closely intertwined with form and structure. For example, again, if your story takes the form of advice offered to someone else, second person POV would make sense. However, if the format is in the form of a diary entry, first person is the main option to choose. Thanks for that information, Bear 5 copy. Now back to the more important things. We are almost done here, so you may get the rest of your time to just watch the Scooper play his game. Our sixth element is another short one, I might say, but the thing about it is that earlier I said we would go over this and how conflict is more important than you think. Element 6 is known as the conflict. Conflicts are what mainly prevents the protagonist from achieving their goals, similar to that of the antagonist, but that is kind of like what the conflict is related to. It is highly recommended that fictional stories have one for a good reason. If a fictional story did not have a conflict, the story would only be happy endings, meaning that there wasn't really a story to begin with and it would make the story incredibly boring and bland, unless you are really going for a happy ending, even though a conflict can lead to a happy ending, I guess. Make up your mind. Seriously. Here, I'll give a conflict example. Imagine that your protagonist is a weird alien from outer space or something. He's on the way home from the bus as quickly as possible because he has something important, right? Here's the better parts about conflict. Now, your conflict can be something small and not too serious, like a late bus that delays the return, or something bigger, possibly a hole in the road that stops the bus from advancing along his trip.
Or a highly powered gamma ray in a lab 30-foot underground being formed from a magnitude 10 earthquake powered by an ultraviolet ray vortex in Galaxy SS 11_8 about to obliterate the Earth.
Don't worry about that. Anyway, just like third person and POV, there are different variants of this one element. There are 7 variants of conflict in total, and each are unique in their own way. The variants include character versus character, character versus self, character versus society, character versus fate, character versus nature, character versus technology, for some reason. Like as I said earlier, conflict is important because it's what makes the story more interesting to read. There would be no story if everyone got what they just wanted immediately, and adding meaningful obstacles is key for a compelling story. Now we are nearing the end, since we are now officially at element 7. We We are only 10 minutes in, so there may be extra time for you to just watch the rest of the video. However, Bear 5 Copy has another announcement, so I'll let him do just that. Thanks again for that Bear 5 copy. Now, back to the topics. This is the last one we can talk about, so you can finally leave and I can rest and get back to a daily uploading schedule on my channel, which I highly doubt. This element is tone. Some hate this element, but some don't, due to how easy it is. Tone is the element that evokes emotion into the story. When you read a story or possibly write one, ask yourself, what feeling is this story trying to evoke in the reader? Examples can be things like fear, amusement, thoughtfulness, dread, the feeling of impending doom. Most certainly. Although tone is closely related to genre, if you're trying to write a thriller, try going for a more scary and suspenseful tone. Another example is if you are trying to write something like a romantic comedy. For this, you might want to go for a more lighter and humorous tone. Stories can vary their tones on a scene level. For example, a thriller can have lighthearted scenes, and that romantic comedies could have more serious tone. Don't worry, having different tones throughout your story, but you want a main tone is completely fine. Change is important at times. Oh, and what do you know? We're finally finished. However, we are 13 minutes in the 20-minute video, so I don't know what to do for the rest of this playthrough. Actually, I'll just give extra information about some of the previous elements, but not full-on explanations. Enjoy, I guess. First on the extra information list is character. The first one mentioned. One thing I forgot to note about character is that, of course, is the most important part about fictional stories. Characters can be anything, ranging from regular humans to animals, aliens, or even sentient objects. Secondly, on the extra information, I want you to try to give me that fictional story that doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. I gave you a whole 13 minutes to find it, so find it quick. If you did find it, I am no longer shocked. Get tricked. Thirdly, on our extra information list is for setting. The information that I forgot to give was the fact I didn't get to continue what I was going to say.
June 25th, 2025, 5.
What was that? I swear just a second ago I was just talking about something. Well, if I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, I ran out of things to say since I went over everything I was supposed to. So congratulations on making it this far. You now get to watch my gameplay on Bear 5's challenge. Do not enjoy.